Vinny Benedetto of the Colorado Gazette joins the show. We're going to talk about all sorts of things with the Nuggets, the championship beat, all that and more here on Locked On Nuggets.
You are Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast, part of the Locked On Network, your team every day. Thanks for joining us and making us part of your day. Appreciate you guys being with us and being in every day or checking in with us daily and joining the show. You can catch us on all sorts of platforms, including YouTube, where you can catch a live version of the show. We passed 5,000 subscribers. We're behind. Locked On Rockets is 10,000. Do you guys really want to be behind the Rockets? I don't think you want to be behind the Rockets. So why don't you send the show to a friend, check it out, hit the like and subscribe button, and you can also check us out on Apple Podcasts, where we would appreciate a 5-star review there, or on Spotify, or wherever you get podcasts. We appreciate you guys making us part of your day, part of your week, part of your month, part of your lives. Appreciate you guys being with us. On today's show, Vinny Benedetto of the Denver Gazette. I messed that up entirely in the intro. Denver Gazette will be with us, talk about the Denver Nuggets and what it's like being a beat writer for a championship team. I'm very interested to get Vinny's thoughts on his in-depth coverage night to night in the locker room and in the media room, and his thoughts on the championship run by the Nuggets. We'll also get into a little bit of the young guys and what next year kind of shows as far as like the young guys and his thoughts on that. But first, Vinny, I got to ask you, because I thought it was really cool that yesterday you were checking out the 303 League, the Denver ProAm yesterday. I thought that was really cool. Tell me what that experience was like, and are you going to be writing on it?
Yeah, I'll be writing on it. We have a little we call it an NBA Insider that publishes once a week, just kind of an easy way to catch up with the going-ons around the league. And then, just trying to localize it a little bit, talking about, just some basketball stuff here in Denver. And so, yeah, I went out yesterday, got to talk to Shea, who is a former WNBA player who now plays overseas, who kind of runs the whole thing, and checked out a couple of the playoff games, got to see a handful of Division I guys. I don't know if you remember Chudier Bile, I believe, got a pre-draft workout with the Nuggets last year. So he was one of the the best guys out there. But it sounds like they pretty regularly get former D2 guys who are now playing in Europe. And then I know last summer Aaron Gordon and Monte Morris showed up. I think Derek White's been around this year. So it's kind of, you never know what you're going to get showing up. None of those guys were there last night, obviously. But they got playoff games going again tomorrow, and I'll probably be back to check it out because it's in my neighborhood, and nothing like a little casual basketball take in.
Nice. You check out the 303 League at the303league.com. So first I want to ask you, Vinny, is what was different about this season from a beat writer perspective? You've covered the team for several seasons. I want to know what stood out to you this season as far as was there anything, or did it feel like just like a totally normal season in regards to like just covering an NBA team with hopes of winning a championship? Was there anything that stood out this season in retrospect after the Nuggets win the NBA title?
Yeah, looking back, it was just kind of, it felt like everybody was aware of the opportunity. For my previous 2 years on the beat, both the playoff runs happened without a healthy Jamal Murray, and obviously one without a healthy Michael Porter Jr. And, over that time, everybody said all the right things, about still having, championship aspirations, but it just felt like it was kind of acknowledged that those last 2 years prior to this one were not going to be their best bet to do it. And then it felt like kind of from training camp in San Diego this year, day one, just kind of felt like everybody was aware that this was the real opportunity to get it done. And I think that kind of mentality and I guess professionalism and maturity kind of remained pretty constant through most of the season, with maybe the last 4 to 6 weeks accepted from that.
Yeah, I think it was interesting just that they were NBA teams and players, especially, they talk about like, don't get too high, don't get too low. And that was very evident in terms of talking to the guys in November, when like Adam and I always joke about, like, we did a show that was like, are the Nuggets in trouble because they didn't get off to a good start. And we were like, this is not going well. And then the team was very much like, it's fine. Like, it's not great. It's fine. Right. They weren't like, no, we're playing awesome, everything's great. And then when they were absolutely just destroying teams in December and January, they were still very much like, yeah, no, we played well. Got to do it for another 5 months. So, we'll see how it goes. They were very even keeled throughout that process. Was there a moment that you can remember in the season, whether it's regular season or playoffs, that you can remember and go like, some team might actually win the title? Like, these guys are really good. This team might actually have it this year.
Yeah. The stretch in like December, January, February, where like the defensive rating kept inching towards the top 10. That was a stretch where I was just like, okay, they're a real contender, and I'd say there's probably only 4 or 5 of those in a given year. That's where I kind of felt like they were at that point. And then Game 6 in Phoenix was the time when I was just like, oh, this is like real, because they had, they won the first 2 here. They go to Phoenix, lose those 2 behind just incredible performances from Kevin Durant and Devin Booker. But then to go back there and win so emphatically in Game 6 was just kind of like an eye opener in terms of, again, just going back to the professionalism and the maturity, and even like just to possess the ruthlessness, I guess, that's needed to not allow, anything can happen in a Game 7, and to go into Phoenix in Game 6 and just shut it down almost from the jump, I thought was really impressive and really opened my eyes to this team, really being a favorite.
Yeah, that Game 6 was really telling in that, they blow them out in Game 5, and I mentioned that one because it was like it was technically like it was an even series. It was 2-2, and they just lost these 2 games, and Devin Booker had shot 80% from the field, and it was like, okay, like let's, they probably win Game 5, but we'll see what happens. And they blow the doors off of them. But even then, like most teams in that spot come home and win Game 5 when they're the favored team and they're up. To go into Phoenix and just like, I mean, that I remember that game just being over like that. Like it was like the Suns came out and battled a little bit, and then immediately Denver was like, no, we're just off to the races. And that one was to do that on the road was one of several statements that they made. They made statements, I thought, in games 1 versus the Wolves, Game 1 versus the Suns, Game 5 and 6 versus the Suns, and Game 3 versus the Lakers were like the most emphatic messages I think that were sent, as well as maybe Game 3 of the finals as well, with the dual 30-point triple doubles. Mm-hmm. So on the other side, I want to get into a little bit with Vinny on the night of the championship and what he remembers from that night and the scenes from the locker room and everything that went on there. We'll talk about that, as well as in a little bit, we'll get into some of the talk about next season and how young this team is going to be behind the starters and what he kind of expects going into next season. We'll do that on the other side. First, I need to tell you about FanDuel Sportsbook. Take your first swing at betting MLB on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets. That's up to $200. That's right. You bet just $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you can spend betting everything from the money line to the over under to who you think is going to have the first home run, all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet on MLB than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon, LOCKEDON, to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. We'll be right back on Locked On Nuggets. Back here on Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for joining us and making us part of your day. Appreciate you guys being with us. Vinny Benedetto from the Denver Gazette, beat writer, kind of join us today and give us his time during guest week. Excited to have Vinny on. So Vinny, I want to ask you, I've kind of talked about this before. You had a mishap later in the night on the night of the championship, which is terrible. But I did want to kind of ask you, run me through what you remember from buzzer through when you left Ball Arena, of kind of what the experience was like being in the locker room, seeing everybody. What are the things that stand out to you from the night the Nuggets won the championship?
Yeah, it's just like an overwhelming joy that is just like permeating. And like, just to be clear, I'm not a Nuggets fan, have never been a Nuggets fan, but it is kind of contagious just being in a room with so many people who are having the best night of their life.
Yeah.
That is, it's just fun to be a part of. And, there's some human part of this where it's like, most everyone in the organization has treated me pretty well. And so it's like enjoyable to see them have their moment, even if, I am not particularly moved by the end result of a basketball game. But yeah, it was just, a crazy atmosphere, a pretty, what I thought was a pretty typical championship celebration. I listened to some of the national people and they were like, yeah, that was like a little more rowdy, a little more, energetic than some of the other ones, which, that was my first championship locker room experience. So I didn't know any better, but it was just a lot of fun to, these guys have had this goal in, kind of to what I was saying earlier about kind of having to delay expectations for a couple of years while guys got healthy, to see it all come together and just, the guys kind of let loose a little bit was just a lot of fun to be in that room.
Yeah. I will say that I think it being the first one matters a lot. And especially I think not just the first one for a team, but the first one for a franchise. I think it's entirely different. It's, the Heat were very different in 2012 and 2013 than some of the other locker rooms that I've been in. 2015 Warriors were like, they were excited, but they were also kind of like the best team from start to finish. So like there was like excitement and joy, but it wasn't like Denver's. The Dallas one was close though. I'll say like the Dallas celebration felt very much like it. What was interesting is that one was on the road. So like they were in this very tiny, if you've been in the Heat visiting locker room, it's tiny, like most visiting locker rooms are. And so it's like this extremely tiny room with Tyson Chandler and Sean Marion jumping up and down and spraying each other with champagne bottles. So that one kind of reminded me of it, but they went all out. You could tell like there was so much champagne that they brought in there. It was really wild. When you were trying to write stories, how do you approach that as a beat writer in terms of trying to tell a narrative that like, do you think about this team could win a championship and so I want to be able to have like stories that told that story? Or are you always just like, I can't get ahead of myself, like we got to just talk about like what's happening now? What's kind of your approach with a team this good? What was the kind of approach that you took into covering that team?
Yeah. And I think from the December, January, February, even, after the All-Star break for a couple of weeks where the Nuggets were just kind of cruising, it got into your mind like, okay, I might be, kind of documenting, a historic run here. And so it wasn't like, the championship didn't become everything in that moment, but it was something that was in the back of your mind in terms of, everyone has bad days at work, but you try to like, when the stakes are high, you try to show up and perform. And that I think that kind of entered the back of my mind. And then like game 5 of the finals, I wrote my story pregame more or less, because it was basically a history of the franchise. And, all these great teams in the 80s can't get it done. Success in the Carmelo era can't get it done. Just because I knew if there was a celebration, I wasn't going to be bringing my laptop into the locker room that night, being able to work in there by any means. So, that night I definitely worked ahead and just kind of knew that, and then print deadlines play a part of it as well, where it's like, you want to be in the locker room to experience that and document some of that for social and that kind of stuff. Cause I was the only person from our outlet in there. So it felt like I needed to be in there on one hand, but I also had print deadlines and obligations to also hit. So it was kind of like, almost pre-writing and then plugging in a quote or two from the press conference afterward allowed me to kind of be in two places at once. And then, I could do catch up work because, people weren't going to be tired of reading about game 5 in the championship, 12 hours after it ended. So I had a little bit of a longer runway to go back and get to some of the things that I couldn't get to that night. But from probably about middle of the season in, it entered the back of my mind that I am lucky enough to be covering something that has the potential to be pretty special, and that I kind of wanted to be at my best as often as possible.
Who was your go-to quote guy this season? Who was the guy that you went to that you felt like you could always go to and get something for print?
I think Aaron Gordon is kind of like a low-key one for me, just great. Because he's he finds a way of being like measured and also expressing genuine emotion at the same time. I don't know if that makes sense, but like you can Nikola has a historic 40-point triple-double, he's not going to give you a ton, for print on his own individual accomplishment. But you could always go to Aaron, and his mind would always be blown by the latest Nikola achievement. So I think he's one of my favorite quotes in the locker room.
Yeah, Aaron was great. I thought for me it was Aaron, KCP, and Jeff were the three guys that I enjoyed talking to the most throughout the season. So with that in mind, you've now covered a championship. How do you anticipate, like, will you talk, like, are your stories, I know it's too early to talk about this because we got a couple months where we don't have to think about work, but do you feel like you'll approach next season a little bit differently with a team looking to repeat as champions in terms of the coverage? Or do you feel like I'm just going to like do what I do and we're going to cover the day to day and do the same, like have the same approach of process stories? Like, how does the championship shift how you feel like you'll approach the beat next season?
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know if I've thought about that a whole bunch. My initial reaction is just to say, still cover the day to day, but you don't have to, it felt like sometimes last year, late in the regular season, where the championship became the end all be all and it had to be mentioned incessantly, that, it was something that just had to be, they lose 2 games they shouldn't have. And then you got to ask the question, like, is this, Michael Malone always talks about championship habits or championship behaviors. And it's like, we're not seeing that right now. So I think it'll be nice to not have to kind of hone in on, are these guys playing at a championship level all the time? I don't know if I would expect these guys to come out and, how do I want to put this? I think they might, start a little bit slower than people might expect.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, I think you have to give them a little bit of a leeway. You don't have to hold the championship expectation, over their head from day one, I don't think. But I think there's something to having done it, certainly fans are going to want to do it again. And so I think it's going to be an interesting balancing act in terms of how much you bring it up, the repeat possibility. But yeah, my initial response is just kind of cover it like I did this season.
Yeah. I think I've kind of settled on the Nuggets are either going to be significantly below regular season expectation or significantly above. I feel like this is either a 47 win team or a 60 win team, and with like very short probability tails for the numbers in between because of number of factors you kind of mentioned there. On the other side, I want to get with Vinny and talk to him a little bit about the young guys and what we've seen, kind of what to expect about how this will go next season and what he kind of thinks about the Nuggets offseason moves. We'll do that when we come back here on Locked On Nuggets. Back here on Locked On Nuggets, thanks for joining us and making us part of your day. Vinny Benedetto from the Denver Gazette joins us. Make sure to check him out at @VBenedetto on Twitter. Are you on Instagram? I haven't checked. I haven't gotten the habit of checking the Instagram before I do guests. Are you on? I
am on Instagram, but I keep it a private account just because that is my last bastion of
like, this is my life. Yeah,
this is my social media. Everything else has become
public.
My personal Twitter has become. I try not to tweet my opinions because I tried that with Will Barton at one point, and I don't have the I don't have the emotional stamina for the back and forth. So yeah, I do have an Instagram. If people want to follow me, I'll probably accept it, but that's just a look. I post bad pictures from concerts 50 rows away like everybody else. There's not I'll post some Nuggets workout stuff occasionally, pregame stuff. But it's pretty quiet over there.
How many shows have you been to so far this summer?
0. Yeah. Haven't been to any so far this year. We're going to change that. I mean, it's not the summer, but I got Wilco coming up in October. I think we've talked about both being there for that one. And, Phoenix and Beck, I believe, are coming out. So that would be one that's
I'm going to that one too, because I saw Beck 2 years ago and he was chef's kiss, and I really want to see Phoenix, so I'm very excited. I'm gonna have you on. We're just gonna do music takes that Adam would hate for an hour next time. I do want to ask you, as we kind of get back here and we kind of wrap things up with Vinny Benedetto from the Denver Gazette, I want to ask you, the Nuggets went young, like they just very transparently went young, and so last year there was DeAndre, who was around as he started off the season as a backup center. That went about as everyone expected. I thought he played well, but the numbers were terrible. Jeff cycled in and out in the regular season, honestly, in that 7-8 role, and then finally wound up as a 7th guy. Bruce was like a very steady presence there as like the 6th man. And the bench was an issue all year, and it got better in the playoffs because they staggered starters most of the time. So if you play starters, you go from playing starters 30 to 35 to playing them 35 to 44, then guess what? You're going to have fewer minutes for the bench. Christian's another year older, and that's good. And I don't necessarily know that I don't expect like a regression from Christian. I don't know how much to expect in terms of improvement from Christian, just because of like what he's asked to do. Maybe like he settles from 3 and just gets a little bit more polished, and that will help. That will show in significant ways. But then it's like Peyton Watson, who I thought had everyone was kind of raving about Summer League, and I thought it was pretty up and down in terms of what he showed relative to expectation. And then you've got guys like Jalen Pickett and Julian Strother, and apparently Hunter Tyson, who is a dominant 3-level scorer. And you've got some of the 2-way guys. You got Colin Gillespie coming back, and Jay Huff, who they added, and all these type of guys. What is your reaction to how the Nuggets approach the offseason? Because they re-signed Reggie Jackson on this 2-year, $10 million deal. And other than that, they're pretty much quiet. They bring in Holiday as kind of like as a reserve, but I'm not sure what his role on the team is going to be. I think he can still be good, but he hasn't been the last couple of seasons. What's kind of been your reaction to what looks like a very much a push for trying to find youth to fill in the minutes both this season and down the line from a developmental pipeline perspective for Denver?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, the front office's hands were kind of tied, obviously financially in terms of what they were able to do without making a trade to mix up the starting 5, which I think would have been an overreaction. But, when they give Reggie the taxpayer MLE, I think that kind of shut down everything else, free agency wise. It felt like everything else was going to be, vet minimums from then on out. And that kind of signals to me that he's got to be a guy who's going to play quite a bit more next year than he did this year. It's going to be, they need a secondary ball handler, and it's going to be him or Jalen Pickett, I think. And I think it's just most likely that Reggie Jackson starts in that secondary role. But yeah, beyond that, it's going to be a lot of youth. Like I think Christian Brown is the only guy you can really ink right into that second unit right now. A lot of people are excited about Peyton Watson, and those flashes at the end of the regular season last year were certainly encouraging. But I think it's almost harder to play well in a reserve role where you're playing 10 or 15 minutes than it would be when the rest, the starters are shut down and you've got a 25 minute runway. So I think that'll be a challenge for any of the young guys who are thrown into the bench to start next season, is how can you find a way to produce with, I guess, little room for error or little time to, get into a rhythm of a game. I think that's a challenging thing for a lot of guys, but especially young guys. And then, Christian, I think he's just got to find a way to improve one aspect of his offensive game, whether that's being a catch and shoot guy or being a little more reliable off the bounce. I think, improvement in one of those two areas would go a long way for the bench, because, they relied on Bruce a lot and Jeff Green to knock down some timely threes. And without either of those guys back, there's certainly going to be minutes and production that needs to be filled. And not an obvious answer, I don't think, as who is going to pick up most of that slack.
If I gave you Vlatko Chanchar and Zeke Naji, and I gave you combined Reggie Jackson, Jalen Pickett, Julian Strother, Hunter Tyson, Colin Gillespie, those 4 guys versus Zeke and Vlatko, who has a higher per game minutes average next season? So I'm essentially asking, who do you think winds up having a bigger presence in the rotation, Zeke and Vlatko or Reggie and the kiddos?
Ooh. Because I'm kind of the thought that only one of Zeke or Vlatko will play regular minutes.
Okay.
So I guess by default, then I'd almost have to go with Reggie and the kids, with Reggie being 90% of those minutes. Where I'm almost like making it a 1-to-1, who's going to play more between Reggie and I still don't have a good feel of what they want Zeke to be. There's this kind of tug of war. Like, are we making him a true center? Are we bulking him up so he can battle true fives? Or are we keeping him kind of a stretch four kind of guy? That's one of the most interesting things to me is we always hear about how great Zeke looks in the offseason. And health hasn't been doing him any favors the last couple of years in terms of allowing him to settle into the rotation. But I guess it's one of those things where I've got to see it from Zeke at this point now before I start to assume that he's going to be a guy who's a staple in the rotation. So give me Reggie and the kids.
All right. Okay. I like that answer. That's Vinny Benedetto from the Denver Gazette. You can catch him on Twitter at @VBenedetto, where I think he is the best play-by-play tweeter amongst the Nuggets media, and catches great work over at the Denver Gazette. Vinny, hope you have yourselves get some rest. Have a great summer. And I will see you in about 2 months. And as a matter of fact, to not terrify you, I'll see you in about 2 months at Media Day, my man. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you. Looking forward to it.
All right, guys. Tomorrow, we're going to do a mailbag episode that's going to be at 10 o'clock Mountain Time tomorrow morning. Send in your questions to @LockedOnNuggets, or you can just hit me up at HP Basketball on Twitter. Hope you guys have a great Thursday. We'll see you guys again tomorrow with another episode of Locked On Nuggets.